Welcome to another episode of The Break Room. I'm your host, Lucinda Underwood. Today we're talking about the future of auto repair and more specifically, cybersecurity issues. Joining me for this conversation and sharing his expertise is Donny Seyfer, Executive Officer at the National Automotive Service Task Force. So Donny, hi and welcome to The Break Room. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Lucinda. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity today. But before we do that, and before we dive into the questions I have for you, I'm wondering if maybe you can tell myself and the listeners a bit more about NASTAF and your role there, what you do.
Sure. Well, my role with NASTAF is I am the executive officer, and that basically means that I'm chief cook and bottle washer. But I've got a team of 4 folks that work with me, and then we've got 4 people on our support desk, and we've got a board of 15, soon to be 16 members. And so that's kind of the function. And then we've got committees that have hundreds of people on them. And we have 44,000 members right now of NASTAF. So we have our mission. We were built by the automakers and the independent aftermarket. Our mission is to identify and resolve gaps in service information, tool information and availability, and then training information as it relates to the OEs and the information that they bring to the table. So in essence, we were built to be sort of the de facto right to repair solution back in 2000 when we were launched.
Okay, wow. And I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of things that you do in that and for the industry. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I'm sure we could probably talk about those things all day too. But let's kind of go into the main topic now. So, as I said, we're talking all about cybersecurity today. I think it's something that is people are fast getting awareness of, that there are issues and they need to be really they need to learn about it. I said to you before I'm recording, it's not something I'm particularly an expert in, so I'm looking forward to learning about it today as well. But the first question I'm going to ask you is, what are some of the issues that we're seeing with cybersecurity, and then how in turn can they affect automotive shops?
You're right. So a lot of the issues that can affect auto repair shops are really personal issues. If you solve your personal security, generally speaking, most of your shop issues are resolved. There are a few exceptions to that, which we can talk about. But generally speaking, the biggest issues out there is you look at what the bad guys want, right? The bad actors. What do they want? They want money. And the way they get it is by stealing your information or stealing your money indirectly or directly. And they do that through a number of ways. Stealing information so that they can get it, in the background, or coercing you into it. There are a lot of different ways that they go about it. And you have to have a front line. Right. So the computers that we use, the phones that we use, and how we access that stuff, you have to have a front line, sort of like having a fence in your yard. If you use it, not only do you use it to keep your dog in, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. We don't want them to take our dog.
Right.
But we also don't want our dog getting out. And we also don't want another dog coming in. So that's sort of kind of a really simple analogy of what we're trying to do with cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we start. And I'll give you just a little bit of background on how I got involved in this. So several years ago, NHTSA published these cybersecurity recommendations for auto manufacturers, but they really also were critical for auto repair, in my opinion, at that time. And so I started teaching cybersecurity classes at trade shows. And when I first started doing this, I got turned down nearly every time I put this course in. Oh, yeah, no, we don't need that.
Right.
It doesn't affect us. So ultimately, I changed the title of the course to You Do Have Something They Want. And I started teaching with a good friend of mine who is a cybersecurity expert. She created our Department of Defense's autonomous system for their tanks.
Wow.
So kind of, a genius. And
Yeah.
her husband is a hacker. So you can imagine what their life's like, right? So at any rate, we started teaching this stuff together, and then it started catching on. And I was teaching, at big parts companies, and I was teaching for trade shows and that sort of thing. And the methods they use have changed a little bit, but the protection for us is still pretty much the same. So I think that's probably what we should dig into, is that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a couple of thoughts I had listening to you speak there. I think it is very easy. Well, firstly, renaming the course "You Do Have Something That They Want," I think really hits the nail on the head, because I think we can be guilty sometimes. And I mean, I'm a small business owner, and the thought has run through my mind, oh, I'm unlikely to be a target. We're seeing all of these high profile issues happening. I mean, even in our industry, obviously recently there was the huge issue with CDK Global. Lots of things happening. We're seeing it in the media a lot, and we just kind of think, oh, that won't happen to me. That'll happen to somebody else. So yeah, let's dive into that a bit more and really kind of talk about, I mean, obviously our listeners are primarily shop owners and managers and things like that, smaller businesses, etc. What do they really need to be aware of, and how can they protect themselves? How can they prepare for some of these issues?
Good question. So we, NASTAF is involved with a group called the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance. We actually do our background checking with them. This organization is made up of all the three-letter organizations, agencies, right? It's made up of banks, automakers, anybody who's dealing with fraud. And so as a result, of course, cybersecurity is one of the things. So we have an annual cybersecurity equivalent of Halloween with these guys, where they scare the hell out of us.
Oh, God.
They're like, okay, so this is the latest and greatest thing they're doing. And then they're doing this, and then they're doing this. And you're like, oh my God, how do you run up front for that? Right? How do you protect against that? And so it comes down to first identifying, we've already talked about what they want, but how do they go about getting it?
Right.
Well, almost to a one, they get it by getting into your digital life.
Right.
They take over some account, and usually you help them to do it. So the key thing here is to really go and change your life from an environment where you trust everything that comes into your email and your phone and all that to I don't even trust it if it's coming from my own son or daughter.
Right.
Because that's the approach. That's how they're trying to get to you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
By using somebody and faking it. So if something comes to you, look at the language. Is that how? I mean, my daughter has this language all of her own.
Yeah.
So if I get a text from her and it's like, the Queen's English, I promise you it is not from her.
Right.
Right. And so you have to be really careful about observing the way that they phrase things, because most attackers, quite frankly, are coming from Asia and Eastern Bloc Europe right now. I mean, yes, we've got them in the United States, but those really big attacks, that's where they're coming from. And so when they use English, they don't use it the way that Americans do.
Right.
And so you can look at that and say, wow, that is just really a weird phrase. Well, that should be your first red flag. If it's coming to you as an email, roll over the URL that the email address is
Yep.
and see if that makes sense. I mean, is that email coming from Lucinda actually her email address, or does it have some weird thing on the end of it like, RU or CN, which would indicate Russia or China? And I'm shocked at how much we get those types of emails on a regular basis. And so what happens is, if that has got a link in it, hey, check out this video, it's really funny, click, and they're in.
Right. That's where the danger lies, right? Is in the, in those links that they send,
Yeah,
once you click that. So, if you happen to click that link, that would then give them access to your, I mean, if you're on your laptop, that would give you access to everything. Is that kind of what you're seeing, or how does that work?
usually it installs a piece of software.
Okay.
Okay, so this then is where you put up that first fence to keep the dog in and the dog's out. And that is you've got some kind of antivirus, hacking, any kind of those sorts of things, phishing. There's all these names for them,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that that's important because you can get so down in the weeds on all that. But what's important is how do I keep those folks out of my yard?
Right.
And the way you do it is with a piece of software because that's what's trying to attack you. So, in our case, the only way we're going to put a fence up is if that fence is software. And so there are lots of good ones out there. And there's an organization called CISA, CISA, which is a government organization that also the FBI has got amazing resources on their website to find the best ways to protect yourself. And it takes a little time to kind of go through them, but they've got really simple like checklists: do this, 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 and this,
Right.
right? So generally, what you want is a package that is protecting you from. I'm going to see if I can. Maybe what I can do is sort of share this if I can get it to show me what I want to. Okay, so I use Avast, and so this is just an example of things that they have. There are free versions. You just don't get as much stuff.
Right. Makes
Um,
sense.
and
Yeah.
so you usually get virus scans,
Mm-hmm.
but here's one of the things that you really want. These two in particular, they call them core shields, and in essence, what they're doing is making sure that no software is trying to be installed that would have direct access to your root account, if you will. So,
Mm-hmm.
we have a user account on our computer, but there's an administrative capability behind that that most of us don't use. And so we'll go into that in just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more detail in a minute. But so core shields protect the computer, and then email,
Mm.
monitor my email box. Now, if you're using a company that like Google or one of those that you get your email through, they're doing some pre-scanning and they're trying to remove the kinds of things that are links to malware, known
Right.
links to malware. But those things, they morph them all the time.
Well, it's keeping up, isn't it? That is the hard thing, right? Because I guess we don't really know what the new method is until somebody does it,
Yeah.
right?
So all of these companies like Avast and Norton and on and on and on, right?
Mm.
They run research centers to see what's going on. At the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance, NCFTA, they've got a malware farm there. And it's an enclosed network where they inject malware to see what it's going to do, when it's
Huh.
going to change, when it's going to rename itself, when it's going to trigger, and they lie to it about dates, and they basically put this thing in a chamber where it doesn't know where it is, but it thinks it does, and they can test it. And so a lot of what those companies they get from NCFTA. So it's somebody you've never heard of, but they do a lot of really good stuff for people. In fact,
Interest.
every single NASTAF member, whether they're a paying VSP or a free member, all of their email addresses are in NCFTA being monitored. And then they send us a note if one of our members gets that email address, out on the dark web for something.
Right.
And we send a note to our member and say, hey, so you probably better change passwords.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is always a shock to them, but it's just a free thing that we do to try to help our members. So back to the what to do with your with that software. So you want to install it and you want to set it up so that it can do updates all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little intimidating because you're like, I'm giving this software deep access to all my stuff.
That's run
So
through my mind before. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and and Avast is out of the Czech Republic.
Hmm.
But they're on CISA's list of companies that play nice.
Right.
You may recall a few years ago we had Kaspersky, which was
Yes.
used all over the place. Turned out that they were actually farming people's information, and they were a bad actor, and so they
Mm.
came off the approved list with
Unsurprisingly,
FBI.
yeah.
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 So it's important to pick carefully. The other component that you may want to add while we're talking about computers is what's called a VPN, or virtual private network.
Hmm.
So for many years, I was saying in my class that the most dangerous place for you to use the internet is the airport,
Right.
because people would set up little repeater networks
Hmm.
that would say like free Wi-Fi, or free airport Wi-Fi, and they were actually looking for you to log in so that they could figure out your traffic and capture your passwords and that sort of thing. So a VPN is very handy when you're not at home.
Mm.
Depending on how your network is set up at home, it's also can be handy for that. But in general, that VPN, it hides you from people who are trying to track where you're going and what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. Is it 100%? No. And there are some websites you will not be able to log into if you've got a VPN on.
Right. Because your
Netflix can
VPNs,
catch it.
that does that conceal your IP address? Is that what that does? Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
I knew something.
nice. Yeah, and also it makes it look like you're somewhere else.
Right.
So where this can be really handy is if you're going to go on vacation in another country and you want to check stuff out, we only see about 3 to 5% of the internet in our world. The whole rest of it is stuff we can't see. It's government, it's bad guys, it's all that kind of stuff, right? But on the other hand, it's also can be hard to even see URLs in another country. So if you want to go somewhere, using a VPN to get into that country's URLs, you can a lot of times find really cool websites that you wouldn't see if you just did a regular Google search.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that part. And also
Yeah.
that 3 to 5% statistic is wild. Because you
It's
think about
terrifying.
what we do have access to. And I knew there was the kind of government use and, like you said earlier, the dark web and all of those kind of things. But to think that what we have is only 3 to 5%,
Yeah,
wow.
exactly.
That is crazy. That is crazy. I want to, so, all of that information is so interesting, and I know will be really helpful to a lot of people listening. But really, just to kind of summarize, I guess, what would be, the average shop owner, maybe they're really just starting to think about cybersecurity. They're starting to realize that, okay, this is something I need to pay attention to. I guess, what would be your top tips for them to really get up to speed with it and protect themselves?
Okay, let's see if I can just pull this off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Step one, the Wi-Fi that you have, it needs to be secured.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
can tell you, I can pull
password
up in front
protected.
of, yep,
Yep. Okay.
I can pull up in front of most repair shops. They're using outdated protocols. The password on the Wi-Fi hotspot is still admin. And I mean, it's all the stuff it came out of the box with. So all I have to do is look it up on the internet and say, I'm in.
Right.
So those things need to be updated. And by the way, it does not cost very much to bring in an IT person to do this for you. So don't do it yourself and screw it up.
That's a very good point too.
I mean, I've done this for years, and I still called in our IT guy and said, you set it up because I'll forget something while I
Yeah.
get called off to a phone, while we're working in the shop.
Yeah.
And so that's first and foremost, get your Wi-Fi secured. And then you can provide a guest SSID that they've got limited access to things. And why do you want to do this? Because your shop management system is on that network, and your financial information may be on there. If you pay bills in-house, I don't know why you would anymore, but if you do, all those things are there. Many of us now have Wi-Fi based or network based point of sale systems as well.
Right.
So credit card transactions could be going through there. There's no bad reason to protect the payments that you get or your money or your customers' information, because it's something we already established bad guys want.
Right. And I mean, that's the other side of it too. It's not just protecting your own information, it's your customers too, which you have a duty to protect.
That's right.
Right. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, get that set up, and I loved what you said earlier as well about just being aware of some of the tricks. Specifically, I mean, I'm now in the habit of doing it, and I think of my mother, because if she gets a weird email, she'll just be like, Lucy, should I open this? I'm like, no, no, you shouldn't. So really kind of knowing what to look for. If something feels a bit off, it
Mhm.
probably is.
Yeah.
Now, let's say, like, worst case scenario, you do click on the link. What do you do then?
So generally speaking, trying to run an antivirus application after you've already gotten yourself in trouble, because they will catch malware URLs most of the time. So if you click on it, you get this little thing in Avast that said, "Phew, saved you from that one," where they toot their own horn, and that's fine by me. Sometimes I click stuff just to see what's going to happen, because I know I've got protections in place and, like, watch this.
Right.
But if you do happen to open something, there are tools that can catch that stuff and possibly stop it. But I would absolutely, first off, get that machine off your network.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondarily, I'd bring in somebody with IT
Right.
experience in that area and let them figure out what exactly has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because the worst part about these is most of the time you don't know
Wow,
that you've done it,
that's true.
right? And what the government, hacking folks are telling us is that these guys are in our systems for quite a while.
Mm.
And they have moved from going after the big companies, who've now become much more sophisticated after the Target thing a few years ago.
That's a very
So
big point.
they moved down.
Yeah.
So here's how you need to think of yourself. If you don't think that you have anything they want, imagine you got really drunk and had every credit card that you could possibly use and every kind of tool that you wanted to buy for your shop. How badly could you get yourself into debt?
Hmm.
Right?
Right.
Both personal and business. You are responsible with your money, so you would be under control. But what are you worth in a credit point of view? When you get a credit report rating that says, "Yo, you're only using 8% of your credit." Okay, now you know how to multiply.
Yeah.
What are you worth? What if your evil twin got in there and took all of it?
That's a really good point as well, though, because again, you things you're saying, I'm catching my own thought processes when I've thought about things like this, and it's, I think you automatically think, when you think of cybersecurity, you think, okay, someone's going to get in and they're going to drain my bank account, right?
Yep.
It's one thing if you've got a ton of savings. If you don't, whatever, I can bounce back from that. But for the credit aspect of that is huge, because we typically have a fair amount of credit available to us, don't we? Right. So
Yep.
it's a good point. That's a very good point.
And you've got a network of friends whose contact information you more likely than not have.
Right.
You've got potentially kids whose bank accounts you may have access to. It just kind of peel the layer, and they're in there looking. If they get a piece of malware in where they're planning to do some sort of an attack, like a ransomware attack, they have been in there looking, and they know what you're worth. And even if you're really good and you've got all your stuff protected, so you've got two-form factor on everything and all of that, and they decide to do a ransomware attack, they still have probably figured out what you're worth.
Right.
And so when that's where I think that a lot of people are just too lax with that. They don't realize what they're actually worth.
Yeah. And I think, again, kind of the average person probably doesn't realize how bad this can get. Right. So, this is a very important conversation.
Yeah, no, good point. And
Mm.
and right now they're saying that the average, and this is not new, this is some older information, that the average ransomware attack is over $250,000
Wow.
on, and this is not including big business.
That's wild.
That's the kind of risk. So you think about it. Could you square up $100,000 or more, or a half a million, or $1 million if you had the right access to your stuff?
That's
If
crazy.
that doesn't keep you up at night and make you buy a piece of software, then I will be shocked.
And I think that, just the fact that the steps are actually relatively easy as well. I think, again, the average person, they might feel quite overwhelmed by this topic if they don't have a good kind of IT knowledge. But it is as simple as, okay, make sure you've got the antivirus software, the protection on your systems, and have an expert. Have a trusted expert to be able to advise you. I think is probably the key, very key takeaway here.
Well, and my friends in the cybersecurity business say that generally the bad actors are lazy. They're looking for the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
So don't be the low-hanging fruit. And to that end, if you're a business owner, I recommend that you pay for antivirus software for every single one of your employees, and you make sure that they put it on not only their machines, but their phones,
Mm.
because those phones are wandering in. We do not let any of our technician or employee phones connect to the business network. They're on the guest side.
Right.
Because if you think about it, these mobile devices are extremely promiscuous. They're connected to everything. And you have no idea what they're bringing into your environment.
That's so true.
Even scan tools. I'm still shocked that shop owners allow technicians to buy and use their own scan tools, take them home. Our policy with our techs is you can use any of our tools, but you have to use them in the shop.
Right.
Bring your car down here. Plus, it's safer for them. We've got safety equipment. We've got everything that they need to do the job. So if you want to use our stuff, that's great. Bring your car down and use it here.
Yeah. It's just having those control measures, right? And I think the more you understand about how this kind of stuff can get in, then you can really kind of put some policies and procedures in place to protect it. Okay, so we're getting close to wrapping up time, but before we do, is there anything we haven't covered? Are there any other kind of real hot points that you want to hit and for our listeners to take away from this conversation?
Well, just one more addition to what you should do in your shop. Generally, we recommend that you have 3 different networks in your shop.
Okay.
So you've got the business side of your house, you've got the guest side of your house, and then all your tools and equipment are segregated from all of that. Used to be because we were concerned about somebody getting into the tool and potentially hacking a vehicle while you were working on it. And we're working on those vehicles in independent repair shops these days.
Yeah.
Right? That generation of vehicle that has that capability or that weakness is there. And so this also means, by the way, shop owners, you need to get your techs to look for updates and sell them to your customers.
Right. Software updates. Yeah.
Vehicles. But also now we've got concerns with tools that are trying to get information and send it to other countries out of your shop.
Wow.
So another reason to segregate the tools and the business side of your house from one another. Plus, you've got employees working on the network, and they can do something unintentional. They can get it, delete whole folders by accident. So it's just that access should only be granted to the people that need it. So it's a no trust environment, except for these places where I trust you.
Right. It makes sense. And I mean, to be honest, I'd never thought about it that way as far as kind of the different networks and what can, the fact that having one network does open people up to everything. So I think that's such a great point to end on. And I really thank you for taking the time to chat with me. So I said at the beginning, I wanted to learn something. I learned a lot.
We're good.
So
Good.
I'll be
Well, thank
making
you.
some changes on my stuff as well, for sure. But Donny, thank you so much. Really
Of course.
appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for watching this episode of The Break Room, driven by Shop Pros. To learn more about what Shop Pros can do for your business, check out shoppros.com. If you like this episode, please leave us a comment or a review, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. The Break Room, where great automotive minds meet.